Progressive Insurance. Quote, buy, and save on home insurance with Progressive's new Home Quote Explorer. Only at Progressive.com. An honor and privilege to have my next guest on the line. Very, very busy man. Kind enough to take time out of his busy schedule to join me. I'm talking about NFL draft expert, college football expert extraordinaire. The one and only Todd McShay is on the line with yours truly right now. What's going on, Todd? How are you, man?
Who's busier than you, though? Come on, let's be real.
You know what? I feel you on that, but you're up there, no question about it. Let's get right to it, Todd. Is Kyler Murray going number one overall?
The confidence seems to be waning. And it's so funny because in the very beginning I was like, you don't draft a guy at 10 and move up and use picks to go get him. As an organization, bring in a coach who doesn't even know if Kyler Murray is going to be in the NFL draft at that point, and then go take another quarterback and try to unleash him. I still think they are. If I had to bet today, I would bet that Kyler's the guy. I couldn't find one guy in the league who had any concern about it. It was a lock. Stick with it. It's going to happen. That's all the information from basically combine on. The last couple of weeks, people are starting to get nervous.
Why are they getting nervous? Why are they getting nervous, Todd?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I can call Terry McDonough, who runs most of the personnel there, and ask him. He's not going to tell me. So you only can trust the information from agents and other general managers and guys who are kind of in the know in the league. And Arizona's not telling anyone. So it's just based off of a lot of speculation and trying to put pieces of the puzzle together. Kyler fits what they want to do, though. And at the end of the day, I keep going back to that because they want a twitchy point guard, if you will, that can operate that offensive system. And he's much more of that than Josh Rosen.
What is Kingsbury's offensive system? Just to get this out of the way so our listeners can understand, what is Kingsbury's offensive system that we need to comprehend as it pertains to why he would take Kyler Murray number one?
All right, so it's called the Air Raid, and they've been running it at Texas Tech forever. Mike Leach kind of started it there and has since gone on to Washington State. And it's spread, a lot of quick throws, getting the ball out. But what it's transformed at Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley, who's one of the great, legitimate great offensive minds in football today.
Okay.
He has taken it and he's added more power elements to it and more complements with the offensive line and different things to it. So Kyler will come in and he'll know the verbiage, he'll know the play calls, he'll know what they want to do, and has been introduced and has been around a more advanced system than actually what Cliff Kingsbury has. So basically it's all about the spread and getting the ball out quickly usually, and there's some elements off of that. But Josh Rosen is more under center, play action, your traditional, NFL type of offensive scheme, where this is just a whole different tempo.
So is that a safe way of saying that if Kingsbury wasn't the head coach at Arizona right now, we wouldn't even be having a discussion about Kyler Murray being the number one overall pick?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. There's no way. You don't. I mean, this will be a historic move. You don't draft a quarterback at 10 after giving up picks to go move up to get him. And then 1 year later say, we were wrong. We needed a better guy, a different guy, and make that decision unless you are convinced, and it starts with the head coach, convinced that Kyler Murray is going to be an upgrade over what you have. And if you're the general manager, Steve Keim, you don't want to make this decision. You don't want to unload Rosen because it's basically saying you failed and you made a mistake last year, even though that's not the case. You would like to stick with Rosen. But if your head coach comes in and says, you know what, if we want to win, I need this guy. What are you going to do? You've got your hands tied, and it's your job as the general manager to make sure your head coach has the best pieces that he can possibly have in order to complete the puzzle.
Tom McShay right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. What the hell is going on with Dwayne Haskins? This is a guy that many people had projected, and I don't recall, I apologize, because I don't have your mock drafts in front of me at this particular moment, but I don't recall anybody talking about Dwayne Haskins being out of the top 10. As a matter of fact, a lot of people assumed that he would end up at number 6 with the New York Giants. Now you're hearing that his stock is dropping before our very eyes. What's going on with him, Todd McShay?
I think a lot of it is false narrative and made up. I think there are a lot of teams, Denver, Cincinnati, Miami, Washington, New York Giants, that would like for him to fall And so there's quietly being whispers and messages put out there. You know how it goes. The NBA draft, the same thing.
Yep.
If you want a guy to fall, his interview wasn't very good. I think he's kind of lazy. And there are some things. Nobody's perfect. Every single player has an issue or two that you got to weigh into the whole equation. And his weight has been an issue in the past, and he's gotten into great shape. There's concern that he's too much about his brand and everything else. But at the end of the day, I always try to go back to the tape. He's a good guy. I've met his mom. I've met his dad. I know the family well enough to know that he's got a good background and he's got good character. He may be a little bit too into what the league is going to give him, but so is Cam Newton, so is Baker Mayfield. And Tom Brady doesn't turn down a lot of appearances when he can make money too. So you got to really keep it in perspective and go back to the tape. And to me, they're very different players, but the two quarterbacks at the top, Kyler Murray and Haskins, are the guys. The tape is the best for those two. I think Drew Lock from Missouri is going to be a really good player. I love his confidence. I love his potential. But the best tape is from the two guys that started just 14 games in college, and that's Murray and Haskins. And I'm going to stick with that until something happens differently, and I'll still stand by it. After the draft, even if Haskins is the third or fourth quarterback taken.
Tom Shea, what's the perfect landing spot for a guy like Dwayne Haskins out of Ohio State?
If they wanted him, I would say the Giants. Mm-hmm. If they feel like they're getting stuck with him at 17, you don't take him. I hear all this stuff about Daniel Jones from Duke, and he's a nice player. He's a good player. Maybe he becomes a solid starter. He looks like one of the Mannings because of the mechanics and because of the time he spent, obviously, with David Cutcliffe, the head coach,
right,
who coached the Mannings and so on and so forth. He's not a Manning. It's different, and he just doesn't have that skill level. So, I look at this class, and to me, I think you take Haskins early, and if you're the Giants after taking Saquon a year ago, even if you want one of these defensive linemen, take Haskins. You've got a quarterback in Eli that can help him. He's been there. He knows the pro style system. Haskins comes in, is going to run the same kind of system. It just fits for the long term of the Giants. But I have gotten zero information that the Giants are interested in him, and if they wind up taking him, Dave Gettleman will come off as one of the great poker players of the draft.
One of the things that I've noticed in several of these draft predictions and what have you is very, very few people, if anyone, has a running back going in like the top 15. Have you noticed that? And if so, why is that the case?
It's not a great class of running backs. I mean, there's a lot of depth in guys that you think can be good number twos and work in a rotation. But we've been spoiled. 2013, 2014, there were zero running backs taken in the first round. Mm-hmm. And we all, the narrative was running backs aren't important anymore. There's no value there. But all of a sudden, we started to get really talented running backs coming through the pipeline again, like Todd Gurley, Zeke Elliott, McCaffrey, Fournette, etc. And if you're good, you're going to go. And that's the whole deal. And this year, Josh Jacobs is the best of the bunch. He's never the guy at Alabama, really, until about the end of the season. This past season, he was splitting carries with Damian Harris.
Right.
And he's explosive. He can block. He can catch. But he's not Todd Gurley. He's not that level of talent. So I envision him somewhere in that 20 to 32 range. He'll be a first-round pick. It didn't help him that he ran in the 4.6s at his pro day, but he's a really good back and a complete back, and I think he'll be the first one off the board, but he'll likely be the only first-round running back we have in this year's class.
DK Metcalf out of Ole Miss, wide receiver, showed up at First Take Studios today. Just looks like an Iron Man, obviously. But when you look at his numbers, I mean, they were 1-7 in the SEC. You look at him; he wasn't even their leading receiver. There were two receivers at Ole Miss that had better numbers than him, although he only played 7 games due to a neck injury. But nevertheless, when you talk about wide receivers, he's the first name that comes to everybody's mind. Why is that?
Well, first of all, a young McShay would love to have one single day on the beach with that body.
How about that?
It's ridiculous. But he's a physical freak. He really is. There's just not many guys who are 6'3.5", 228 pounds, who run it in the low 4.3s in the 40-yard dash. But you got to look at the big picture. I think Marquise Brown from Oklahoma is the best player in the class. I think he's the most explosive wide receiver that I've ever evaluated, and I think he's a lot like a Deshaun Jackson, who a young guy coming out of Cal who had some issues and some concerns. He slipped a little bit, but was certainly a top 10 talent. Mm-hmm. But with DK specifically, and he's a great worker, he works hard, he was the vocal leader of that team, he did all the right things. But you look at some of the lateral movement stuff, the short shuttle, the three-cone drill, and then you watch the tape and you see that it matches up. He was right on par with Tom Brady in terms of his short shuttle numbers, the tests and how slow he was. So he just doesn't work laterally very well. He doesn't get in and out of breaks as a receiver, not to get too technical, but he does one thing at an extremely high level, and that is get off of press, getting down the field vertically, and there's not many guys who can do it. So maybe he slips to the second round, but he's not going to be out of the top 40, and I would lean heavily towards he's going to be a late first-round pick.
Last question to you. I know you think highly about Nick Bosa. You think he's probably the best player in the draft. I think I heard you say that. First of all, you still feel that way. That's correct, right?
Yep.
All right. Outside of Nick Bosa, who's the next best defensive player in this upcoming draft, regardless of position?
Yeah, it's loaded. I would go with Quentin Williams, the defensive tackle from Alabama, who came on this year after, those Alabama guys, sometimes you just get behind a bunch of first-rounders and you don't get to play much. So he redshirts as a freshman 3 years ago. As a redshirt freshman, he plays, but in a rotation. And then finally, this is his year where he's a starter for the first time in his career, and he explodes. He's got power. He's got quickness. I think he can fit basically any scheme, but I think he's going to be a special player at the next level. The only other name I'd throw out there, and he's going to wind up slipping because he had an off-the-field incident when he was in high school, and he had an ACL injury recently. But Jeffrey Simmons from Mississippi State, I think might be the best, most talented player in this draft, and I certainly think one of the top 5 players. And a team, they're going to be concerned that he doesn't play as a rookie or he only plays a partial season. I would take him anywhere after 10 because I know I'm getting one of the best 3-5 players in this class at 10. And if I have to wait a year, then I have to wait a year.
Todd McShay, appreciate the great work. Looking forward to seeing you in Nashville next week. I'll be there, buddy. Thanks for everything.
Nice. Look forward to it.
All right, buddy. The one and only Todd McShay right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News, 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. You're listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPN News. We're back with your calls to close out the show in a minute. By the way, if you missed any of today's show, go check out On Demand in the Stephen A. Smith podcast, brought to you by the Capital One Saver Card. Earn 4% cash back on dining and entertainment, 2% at grocery stores, and 1% on all other purchases. Hey, what's in your wallet?
Craving even more of Stephen A?